In the silent expanse of the galaxy, the U.S. Sentinel glided through the void, her steel hull shimmering under distant starlight. Lieutenant Commander Jason Hale stared at the main console, hands tight on the controls, when a sudden alert flashed red. Unidentified vessel ahead. Minimal life signs detected, reported the ship's AI in a calm, mechanical voice. Jason leaned forward, narrowing his eyes at the radar screen. A ship. Out here. No patrols are scheduled this far beyond the colonies. The screen flickered, displaying the outline of a strange, organic-looking craft, damaged, drifting, and seemingly lifeless. But Jason's gut told him otherwise. AI. Prepare for a boarding mission, Jason commanded, already gearing up in his combat exosuit. His orders were clear. Investigate the unknown ship, search for survivors, and secure any information about the vessel's origin. With a hiss of decompressing air, Jason boarded his small shuttle, his heart pounding against his ribs. The shuttle glided silently toward the crippled alien craft. As the airlock clicked into place, Jason raised his pulse rifle, ready for anything. Inside, the vessel was a bizarre amalgam of technology and biology. Tendrils of glowing vines snaked along the walls, and the air was thick with a sweet, otherworldly scent. Jason's steps echoed through the quiet hallways as he followed a faint signal, the sign of life barely clinging on. Then, he found her. Lying against a shattered console, an alien girl lay unconscious. She was unlike anything he had imagined, skin a pale silver, hair flowing like liquid moonlight, and strange, glowing patterns that flickered across her arms and legs like starlight on water. Jason crouched beside her, his HUD scanning for vitals. The AI reported in a neutral tone. Life signs weak, suggest immediate extraction. With practiced care, Jason lifted her into his arms, the alien girl's delicate frame light as a feather. As he carried her back to his shuttle, a strange sensation washed over him, something between responsibility and curiosity. Who was she? What had happened to her? And more importantly, what had she been running from? Back on the Sentinel, the alien girl was placed in the medical bay, her breathing shallow but stable. Jason stood by the bedside, staring down at her fragile form. Then, without warning, her eyes fluttered open, deep violet orbs that seemed to pierce through him. Her lips parted, and she whispered in a soft, melodic tone, "Help me, please." Before Jason could respond, the alien girl's strength gave out, and she slipped back into unconsciousness. Jason's jaw tightened. Something told him this was just the beginning. Jason sat at the bedside, watching the strange girl sleep, her chest rising and falling in slow, shallow breaths. Every instinct told him she was more than just a lost traveler. The intricate bioluminescent patterns across her skin pulsed faintly, as if they were alive, responding to some inner rhythm or emotion. The Sentinel's medical officer, Dr. Marina Vasquez, approached from the other side of the room, her face lined with curiosity. "Her biology is incredible," she whispered, scanning the unconscious girl with a handheld device. "Her physiology is unlike anything I've ever seen. Part organic, part synthetic. It's like her body is bioengineered to adapt." Jason frowned. "Do you know who, or what, she is?" Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "No, but if she doesn't wake up soon, we might never know. Her vitals are deteriorating. We need to figure out what she was running from, and fast." Jason's thoughts swirled. Something about the girl felt personal. A strange connection, one he couldn't quite place, tugged at him. She needed help, and that much he could give. Suddenly, the alien girl stirred. Jason straightened as her violet eyes opened, wide and terrified. She jerked upright, gasping for air. Jason raised his hands, speaking softly. "Easy. You're safe. You're aboard the Sentinel. We found you." The alien girl blinked, her expression a mix of confusion and relief. "Sentinel," she echoed in a lilting voice, as if testing the word on her tongue. Then her gaze locked onto Jason, something unspoken passing between them. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice tinged with wonder. "I am Cirrus." Jason gave a small nod. "Lieutenant Commander Jason Hale." He hesitated, then asked, "Can you tell us what happened to you? Your ship, it's not like anything we've ever seen." Cirrus's expression darkened. "We were attacked, hunted." She closed her eyes, her voice trembling. "My people, the Liari, fled from the collective. A ruthless empire. We thought we escaped, but—" her voice cracked with emotion. "The hunters found us." Jason felt his jaw tighten. "The collective, they consume everything," Cirrus whispered, her hands clutching the edges of the blanket. "Planets, ships, lives. They came for us, and we ran. But my ship," her voice faltered. "We didn't make it." A heavy silence fell over the room. Jason exchanged a glance with Dr. Vasquez, the weight of Cirrus's words sinking in. "You're telling me there's an enemy force out there?" Jason's voice was low, filled with concern. "And they could be headed our way?" Cirrus nodded slowly, fear flickering in her violet eyes. "If they find your ship, they won't stop until you are destroyed." Jason's mind raced. The Sentinel was deep in uncharted space, far beyond any backup or communication relay. If what Cirrus said was true, they had unknowingly stumbled into a war zone, and now they were in the crosshairs of a relentless enemy. But there was something else, something Jason couldn't ignore. Cirrus was alone, vulnerable, and clearly terrified. Whatever her reasons, she had risked everything to survive, and now she was looking to him for protection. Jason stood from the bedside, determination settling over him like armor. "We'll keep you safe," he promised, his voice firm. "We'll get you out of this." Cirrus looked up at him, her gaze softening. "Thank you, Jason." There was a warmth in her voice that caught him off guard. It wasn't just gratitude, it was trust, something fragile and precious. Dr. Vasquez cleared her throat. "Her vitals are stabilizing, but she needs rest." Jason gave a curt nod. "I'll be back." He turned to leave but stopped when Cirrus's hand lightly touched his arm. "Please, don't leave me alone," she whispered, her voice barely audible. There was a vulnerability in her words that made Jason pause. For a moment he said nothing. Then, with a small sigh, he sat back down. "I'm not going anywhere." Hours passed, and Jason stayed by Cirrus's side as she drifted in and out of sleep. Her breathing had steadied, but every now and then her fingers would clutch at the blanket as if chasing away nightmares. Jason kept his vigil in silence, his mind turning over everything she had told him. They were in deep trouble. If the collective was on their trail, the Sentinel wouldn't stand a chance. And yet, there was no way he would abandon Cirrus to whatever fate awaited her. Suddenly, the ship's AI interrupted his thoughts. "Lieutenant Hale, incoming transmission from the forward sensors. Large energy signature detected. Potential hostile approaching." Jason's stomach dropped. "How long until they reach us?" "Approximately 15 minutes. Jason cursed under his breath. "Sound the alert. Prepare all defensive systems." He turned back to Cirrus, who was now awake, her violet eyes wide with fear. "They found us, haven't they?" she whispered. Jason nodded grimly. "Looks like it." Cirrus sat up, determination flashing in her gaze. "Then we fight." Jason arched an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden shift in her demeanor. "You're in no condition to fight." "I won't let them take me," Cirrus said fiercely. "Not again." Jason studied her for a moment, then gave a curt nod. "All right, but you stay close to me." Cirrus managed a weak smile. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Jason couldn't help but smile back. Despite the danger closing in around them, there was something about Cirrus, something he couldn't quite explain. But one thing was certain, they were in this fight together. And no matter what came next, Jason wasn't going to let her go without a fight. The ship's emergency lights flickered to life, casting the corridors of the Sentinel in harsh red hues. Alarms echoed through the halls as Jason Hale raced toward the bridge, Sarah's trailing behind him. Her movements were slow, weakened by her ordeal, but her determination burned brightly in her violet eyes. "We need to brace for impact," Jason said, glancing at her. "Whatever's coming isn't friendly." The bridge crew was already in place by the time Jason and Cirrus arrived. Lieutenant Adams, the tactical officer, turned in his seat, eyes wide with concern. "We've got a massive energy signature closing in fast. It matches nothing in our databases." Jason gritted his teeth, sliding into the captain's chair. "Shields up, weapons on standby." Sarah stood by his side, her expression grim. "It's the collective," she whispered. "They're here." Jason felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He leaned toward the communications console. "AI, hail the approaching vessel. Let's see if we can talk our way out of this." The bridge went silent as the comm system crackled to life. For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then a chilling voice filled the air. "Identify yourselves," the voice demanded, cold and mechanical, with an undertone of malice. Jason's fingers hovered over the controls. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jason Hale of the United Nations ship Sentinel. We are a peaceful vessel conducting deep space exploration." "Identify yourself." Sarah's expression softened. "Your kind is strange, but it's a good kind of strange." The warmth in her voice caught Jason off guard, and he gave a small laugh. "We'll take that as a compliment." They reached the medical bay, and Dr. Vasquez was already waiting, running diagnostics on a glowing console. "Saris is stable for now," she reported, glancing up at Jason, "but she needs rest. Her system is still recovering from the strain." Jason nodded and turned to Saris. "You should stay here for a bit. Get your strength back." Saris looked reluctant. "What if they find us again?" "What if?" "They won't," Jason interrupted, his tone firm. "Not if I have anything to say about it." For the first time, Saris's guarded demeanor slipped, and she gave him a genuine smile. "You really mean that, don't you?" Jason smiled back. "Yeah, I do." Hours later, a sudden discovery. Jason sat in his quarters, reviewing the data they had pulled from Saris's ship. His brow furrowed as lines of alien text scrolled across the screen, the translation incomplete. Something about the information nagged at him, pieces of a larger puzzle he hadn't yet put together. Then the ship's AI chimed in. "Lieutenant Hale, Saris has accessed the engineering bay." Jason shot to his feet. "What? How did she?" "She bypassed the security protocols," the AI responded. "She appears to be working on something with the ship's systems." Jason cursed under his breath and bolted from his quarters, making his way to engineering. When he arrived, he found Saris hunched over a console, her silver fingers moving deftly across the controls. "Saris," Jason called, rushing toward her. "What the hell are you doing?" Saris glanced up, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. I needed to check your defenses. If the collective returns, your systems won't be enough." Jason frowned. "You could have asked. We'd have let you help." "I didn't think you'd trust me," she admitted softly. "Not after everything." Jason exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I trust you, Saris, but next time, just talk to me, all right?" Saris gave a small nod. "All right." She turned back to the console, her expression serious. "I was upgrading your shield matrix. Your technology is primitive, but it has potential. With some adjustments, it might hold against a second attack." Jason arched an eyebrow. "Primitive, huh?" Saris's lips twitched in a playful smile. "It's charming, in its own way." Jason couldn't help but grin. "Glad to hear it." A moment of understanding. The upgrades complete, Jason and Saris lingered in the quiet of the engineering bay. For a moment, they just stood together, the hum of the ship's system surrounding them like a gentle pulse. "You're different from anyone I've ever met," Sarah said quietly, breaking the silence. Jason leaned against the console, crossing his arms. "You're not exactly what I expected, either." Sarah hesitated, then took a small step closer. "Do you always risk everything for people you barely know?" Jason gave her a half-smile. "I don't know. Guess you're just special." Sarah's gaze softened, and she held his eyes for a moment longer than necessary. Something unspoken passed between them. A connection, fragile yet undeniable. Jason cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "We should probably get some rest. There's no telling what's coming next." Sarah smiled, a flicker of mischief in her eyes. "I'll hold you to that." Jason laughed softly. "Good night, Sarah." As Jason turned to leave, Sarah called after him, her voice soft but filled with meaning. "Jason, thank you." He glanced back, offering her a reassuring smile. "Anytime." The Sentinel drifted silently through the black ocean of space, the hum of the engines a soothing rhythm beneath the tension that had taken hold of the crew. Jason leaned against a railing on the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. The weight of Sarah's presence, her story, her vulnerability, pressed on his mind. He barely heard the quiet footsteps behind him until Sarah spoke. "You always come here, don't you?" Jason turned to see her standing a few steps away, wrapped in a loose medical coat that Vasquez had given her. She looked better, stronger, but there was still a fragility about her, like a bird perched on a branch too thin to hold it. "Yeah," Jason replied with a faint smile. "Helps me think." Sarah moved closer, her gaze shifting toward the stars. "Your people really are curious creatures, always looking outward, searching for something." Jason leaned on the railing, glancing at her. "And what about your people? What were the Liari looking for?" For a moment, Sarah was silent, her eyes distant. "Freedom," she whispered finally. "A place where we could live without fear, without the collective watching our every move. We thought we'd found it, but they never stopped hunting us." Jason's chest tightened. "And now they're hunting you again." Sarah gave a small nod, her expression haunted. "I thought, maybe this time, I'd outrun them. But they always find me." Jason reached out, resting a hand gently on her arm. "They won't find you here. Not as long as I'm around." Sarah turned toward him, her violet eyes shimmering with gratitude. For a moment, the distance between them seemed to disappear, and Jason felt the pull of something deeper, something he hadn't expected to find out here in the cold reaches of space. But before he could say anything, the ship's AI interrupted. "Lieutenant Hale, please report to the bridge. Incoming signal from an unidentified source." Jason sighed, pulling away reluctantly. "Guess the universe doesn't believe in downtime." Sarah gave a small, knowing smile. "We should go." The warning. Back on the bridge, the air was thick with tension as Jason and Sarah arrived. Lieutenant Adams looked up from his console, his expression grim. "We're picking up a transmission, sir. It's fragmented, but it looks like it's coming from a Liari escape pod." Jason's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life, distorted bursts of static mingling with garbled words. Then a voice came through. Liari voice, faint but unmistakable. "Mayday. Escape Pod 7. The Collective. Survivors. Please help." Jason exchanged a glance with Sarah, whose face had gone pale. "It's one of my people," she whispered, her voice filled with both hope and fear. Jason turned to Adams. "Can you locate the signal?" Adams tapped rapidly at his console. "It's weak, but I've got a fix on it. Looks like it's coming from an asteroid field about 2 light hours from here." Jason nodded, his decision already made. "Plot a course. We're going to get them." Sarah grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Jason, it could be a trap." Jason met her gaze, his expression steady. "Maybe. But if it's not, we can't leave them out there." Sarah hesitated, then gave a small nod. "All right, But if we're going, we do it together. Jason's lips twitched in a small grin. Deal. The rescue mission. The Sentinel slipped quietly through the asteroid field, its engines thrumming softly as Jason guided the ship toward the source of the distress signal. Massive rocks drifted lazily through space, some large enough to swallow the ship whole. It was a dangerous route, but Jason's hands were steady on the controls. There, Adams said, pointing to a faint blip on the radar. Escape pod, dead ahead. Jason squinted at the viewport and spotted it. A small, battered pod wedged between two jagged asteroids. The pod's hull was scorched and pitted, but the life support systems were still active. Jason grabbed the intercom. Prepare a boarding team. We're bringing them in. Saris stood beside him, her expression tense. Be careful. If the collective followed them, we'll be ready, Jason promised. The Sentinel maneuvered carefully into position, locking onto the escape pod with a magnetic tether. As soon as the pod was secured, Jason and Saris headed to the airlock with a team of security personnel. The doors hissed open, revealing the cramped interior of the escape pod. Inside, two Liari survivors lay unconscious, their pale skin streaked with soot and dried blood. Saris rushed to their side, checking their vitals. They're alive, she said with relief, but barely. Jason helped her lift the survivors onto stretchers, the security team quickly ferrying them to the medical bay. Just as the last survivor was loaded onto the stretcher, the ship's AI sounded an urgent alarm. Hostile vessels detected. Multiple targets inbound. Jason's heart sank. The collective. Saris's expression hardened. They found us. The collective's return. Back on the bridge, the tension was palpable as Jason barked orders to the crew. All hands to battle stations. Adams, bring the weapons online. Shields at full strength. The radar screen lit up with red dots. Collective ships, fast and deadly, closing in on the Sentinel's position. We don't have much time, Jason muttered. AI, how long until they're in firing range? Approximately 3 minutes, the AI responded calmly. Jason turned to Saris, his mind racing. Can you boost our defenses? We need every advantage we can get. Saris nodded, already moving toward the nearest console. I can reroute power to the shields and reinforce the weapon systems, but it won't be enough to hold them off forever. Jason clenched his fists. He just needs to buy us time. The Sentinel shook as the first wave of energy bolts slammed into the shields, sparks flying from overloaded circuits. Jason gripped the railing on the bridge as the crew scrambled to keep the ship operational. Shields at 60% and falling. Adams called, his voice tight with urgency. Jason narrowed his eyes, thinking fast. We need to even the odds. AI, prepare missile bays for launch. Target the nearest enemy ship. Aim for the engines. The ship shuddered as the Sentinel fired a volley of missiles. The missiles streaked through space, trailing bright tails of light, before slamming into the hull of the closest collective vessel. Explosions rippled across its surface, sending debris spiraling into the void. 1 down, 3 to go, Adams reported. But there was no time to celebrate. Another volley from the enemy slammed into the Sentinel, making the lights flicker ominously. Saris worked furiously at a nearby console, her hands moving in a blur. I've reinforced the shields. It will buy us a few more minutes, but we need a way out. Jason's mind raced. Running wasn't an option. The collective ships were faster and better armed. They had to fight, but with every hit, their chances dwindled. Then an idea hit him. Saris, Jason called. Can you interface directly with their systems? Saris's violet eyes widened. If I can access their network, I might be able to disable their weapons, but I'll need to be close. Jason nodded, already making the decision. We'll get you close. Desperate plan. The plan was risky, borderline suicidal, but it was their only chance. Jason and Saris boarded a small stealth shuttle, slipping out of the Sentinel under the cover of the asteroid field. Their target, the lead collective ship, where Ceres could tap into the enemy systems and disable their weapons. The shuttle weaved between the drifting rocks, dodging enemy fire as Jason piloted with precision. "We're almost there," he said, glancing at Ceres. "You ready for this?" Ceres gave a determined nod. "Let's end this." The shuttle latched onto the hull of the enemy ship, and the airlock hissed open. Jason raised his pulse rifle, leading the way as they entered the dark, metallic corridors of the collective vessel. Inside, the air was cold and stale, the ship eerily silent. Jason and Ceres moved quickly, following the signals Ceres traced through the walls. "There," Ceres whispered, pointing to a control hub. "I can access their network from here." Jason stood guard as Ceres plugged into the system, her silver fingers glowing faintly as she worked. "Just need a few more seconds." The seconds felt like hours as Jason scanned the dark hallway, pulse rifle at the ready. Then he heard it. Low mechanical growl. "We've got company," Jason muttered, tightening his grip on the rifle. A group of collective drones emerged from the shadows, their sleek, insect-like bodies glinting in the dim light. Jason opened fire, the pulse rifle barking with sharp bursts. One drone fell, then another, but more kept coming. "Hurry, Ceres," Jason called, firing another shot. "I can't hold them off much longer." "I've almost got it," Ceres responded, her voice tense. Jason ducked behind a panel as a drone's energy blast whizzed past his head. He fired back, but the odds were against them. If Ceres didn't disable the ship's system soon, they were both as good as dead. Turning the tide. Suddenly, Ceres's console beeped. "Got it," she cried, yanking her hands free. "Their weapons are offline." Jason grinned, but the victory was short-lived. "Time to go," he shouted, blasting the nearest drone and grabbing Ceres's hand. They sprinted back to the shuttle, Jason firing over his shoulder as the drones pursued them. The shuttle doors slammed shut just as the enemy drones reached them, their metal claws scraping against the hull. Jason hit the thrusters, and the shuttle shot away from the collective ship, weaving through the asteroid field toward the Sentinel. Back on the Sentinel, the crew erupted into cheers as the enemy ships powered down, their weapons disabled by Ceres's hack. "We did it," Adams shouted. "The collective ships are retreating." Jason exhaled a deep breath, relief flooding through him as the enemy vessels disappeared into the distance. With the collective threat neutralized, the crew of the Sentinel worked tirelessly to repair the ship. The rescued Liari survivors slowly recovered in the medical bay, their fear giving way to cautious hope. Jason and Ceres stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars drift by in silence. The battle was over, but the connection between them lingered, unspoken but undeniable. "So, what happens now?" Jason asked, breaking the silence. Ceres gave him a small smile. "I suppose I find a new place to call home, somewhere far from the collective." Jason nodded, his heart heavy with the thought of her leaving. "You'll always have a place here, if you want it." Ceres's smile softened. "I know." She took a step closer, her hand brushing against his. "You've given me more than just a place to stay, Jason. You gave me a reason to believe again." Jason's breath caught as she looked up at him, her violet eyes shimmering with something more than gratitude. "And you gave me something I never thought I'd find," she whispered. "Someone worth staying for." Jason's heart pounded in his chest, and before he could second-guess himself, he leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss, soft, tentative at first, then deepening as the weight of everything they had been through melted away. When they finally pulled apart, Ceres rested her forehead against his. "I want to stay," she whispered. "If you'll have me." Jason grinned, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "I wouldn't want it any other way." With the collective threat behind them, the Sentinel continued its journey through the stars, exploring the unknown. Ceres found a new purpose among the crew, her knowledge of bioengineering proving invaluable. But more than that, she found a home, and with Jason, she found something even more precious. Together, they faced whatever the universe had in store, knowing that no matter how far they traveled, they would always have each other. And as the stars stretched endlessly before them, Jason knew one thing for certain: their adventure was only just beginning.